Julie Wilcox is a health and wellness entrepreneur, writer, and expert. She is the founder of Julie Wilcox Wellness, a consulting company that champions wellness for global clients. Julie's teachings incorporate personalized, balanced, and sustainable practices for holistic, healthy living. She has worked with thousands of individuals through corporate and institutional wellness programs, as well as nonprofit organizations. As a writer and content creator, Julie's articles and videos have been featured in many notable publications, including Forbes, Fox News Health, Parade, and Mind Body Green. Julie collaborated with esteemed scientists at the Rockefeller University on an obesity and pregnancy nutrition study for adolescent women. She earned her master's degree in nutrition and dietetics at New York University and AB at Harvard College in English and American Literature. And Dana Cowin is an American editor, author, and radio show host, best known for her 2 decades as the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine. During her tenure at the magazine, she expanded and introduced the magazine's annual Best New Chefs Award and Most Innovative Women in Food and Drink. After Food and Wine, Cowin joined the restaurant group Chefs Club as a scout, selecting chefs from around the world to be featured on their curated menus. Cowin moved on to launch DBC Creative, a brand consultancy, and to become host of Speaking Broadly on Heritage Radio Network, interviewing women in the food industry about their greatest challenges and triumphs. She was a judge on Bravo's Top Chef, a presenter at TEDx Manhattan, and a lecturer at the Food and Wine Classic and other food festivals. In 2014, Cowin published Mastering My Mistakes in the Kitchen, learning to cook with 65 great chefs and over 100 delicious recipes. We are so excited to have them both here today, so I'm going to let them take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's so great to be here with you, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone as well at RJ Bookhampton, you, Dana, for being here tonight.
So I am so excited about your book. I have like by my bedside table and now in my hot little hands. I've been waiting to have a printed copy because I feel like it is the key to understanding a whole lot of different eating patterns and a way to approach eating that sometimes eludes me, because I'm an omnivore, but in my dreams, I'm eating a little bit less meat and a lot more vegetables. So I know you can help us with that. And in fact, just one little point, I am at an amazing hotel in Mexico, Hotel San Cristobal. Thank you guys for letting me use your good Wi-Fi and just pounded down 3 steak tacos. So I really need your help, that's all I'm saying.
I'm here for you.
Thank you. Julie, this book has so much research and it's so thorough. What drew you to the topic and what made you write The Win-Win Diet?
So there are really 2 main reasons that I wrote this book. The first has to do with my unique perspective on nutrition and wellness, which draws essentially from 3 distinct phases of my life. The first was from when I was quite young, from the ages of 8 to 15, when I was a very serious gymnast training under Russian coaches with hopes and dreams of going to the Olympics. And at that time, I had to adhere to an incredibly restrictive diet, which was quite challenging and not exactly fun.
It sounds horrible, honestly. But if you want to be an Olympian, I guess that's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. But there was a silver lining from that. And that is that I was able to take away a healthy amount of discipline that would serve me well later in life. So as an adult, then I became a yoga teacher and studio owner, and I learned to embrace mindfulness and balance. And when I was able to combine those principles with the discipline, I was able to approach food and my diet with a much healthier perspective. And I was much more content and at peace with myself and with my whole, attitude towards food, essentially. Finally, when I went back to school to get my master's and then became a nutritionist, I learned about the science of nutrition and how important it is to personalize diet. So really, the book is an amalgamation and culmination of all those experiences and the lessons and the principles I learned and drew from them and have applied into this system and methodology that I think really works. It's not a fad diet. It's not a quick fix. It is an approach that is meant to be sustainable for life. And the second reason is that I wanted to clarify for people out there what a plant-based diet really is, because there's a misconception amongst many, many, many people out there in the world that in order to be plant-based, you have to become vegan and you have to go all the way to the extreme and eliminate all animal products. And that is not what the definition of the term plant-based is. What it means to be plant-based is to simply increase your consumption of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and plant-based proteins while reducing your consumption of animal-derived products and processed foods. But you don't have to go all the way and sacrifice foods you love if you want to keep some of those in your diet.
So I mean, I can keep my flank steak taco.
You can in moderation.
Okay. I'm actually really interested in this notion of the discipline and the mindfulness, and how those two like are balanced inside of you, and also how they are reflected in what you've written with the book, right? Because you probably need a certain amount of discipline to follow the eating patterns that you're recommending, but you also benefit from mindfulness, and the principles that you are discussing are really about mindfulness for your body, mindfulness for the planet. And so I love that it originated in such a natural place in your life, like the gymnastics and then the yoga, like the two of them coming together, which wasn't a question, but it's just an observation.
Yeah.
So I love the title of this book. The minute I heard it, I was like, oh my God, who doesn't want the win-win diet? Although I don't like to diet, but I like the win-win. So how did you come up with the title?
There are many win-wins in the book, actually. And the most important of those is that you can eat an incredibly healthy diet that is delicious and that comes with a laundry list of health benefits, but you don't have to sacrifice the foods that you really love. And as you mentioned, the side pockets are that you are also doing service to the environment and animal welfare too. So, I feel like, that there's so many reasons that one would want to go plant-based. The health benefits, including enhanced energy, better sleep, stronger immunity, enhanced mood, prevention, management, treatment of chronic diseases of all types, from cardiovascular disease to type 2 diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's. That in addition to not having to lose out on flavor and taste and things that you want to be eating is absolutely a win-win.
So, I want to talk about the 4 eating systems because, I want to know about that. But the first thing, like, you went to nutrition school, you had this mindfulness background, you were a gymnast, but in putting all those together, you actually came up with a system. Like, I've never heard this system before that really starts sort of at the most open ways of eating. So going and transitioning from one to the next to the next. How did you come up with that particular idea? What are the diets? And then how did you come up with this novel way of transitioning?
I really wanted to establish a methodology that people could follow that would be gradual. So again, they could stick to it, so that it wouldn't be something that just comes and goes, but could really last. And these are ways that throughout my life I have figured out have really worked for me to achieve my goals. So in terms of how it works, portion size, as we know, in this country and world has become a real problem. And so the first phase of transitioning, which occurs over the first 2 weeks, is to reduce.
Actually, I realized I asked you two things. I asked it backwards. Why don't we tell everybody about the 4 eating patterns first, because then it'll make some more sense. Sorry.
Okay, sure. That's okay. So there is the Flexitarian eating pattern, which reduces meat consumption or makes different choices about meat consumption. And other animal products as well. So maybe you want to avoid processed meats, but you still eat pretty much other meats. Maybe you want to eat white meat, but not red meat. Maybe you want to choose to eat organic, pasture-raised, local, grass-fed meats instead of that from factory farm, and same with dairy and eggs. Pescatarians eat fish, eggs, and dairy, but not meat. Vegetarians eat eggs and or dairy, and vegans don't eat any animal products at all. So those are the 4 eating patterns.
Wow. Okay. And let's just talk about the challenges associated with some of them. Like, some questions come up in my mind. For example, with pescatarian, I'm not going to say I've read studies because I'm not very scientific, but I feel like I've read articles that say, limit your consumption of fish, actually. And small fish are good, big fish are bad. Like, tell me about that. Like, so I sort of stay away from the pescatarian idea because I'm worried about mercury or like other heavy metals in fish.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are fish to avoid for that reason, such as swordfish, tuna steaks, shark, tilefish. So that can definitely be a concern. It depends on where you get your fish from and what choices you want to be making again. So some people prefer farm fish over wild fish. Some people prefer wild over farm. Some people, want local. Some people want, people just, some eat seafood, some eat only fin fish. So it's really a personal choice.
You feel like those things are all equivalent? Again, like I would lean towards like smaller fish rather than the bigger. There's also the things that are on the Monterey watch list. Like, fish is complicated, but I guess there's so many benefits to fish. Like, what are the benefits to the pescatarian diet that
well, you get protein, you get vitamin D, omega-3s from fish. And these are, really terrific for our health. And it provides variety for a diet. Sometimes when people go vegetarian, as I did when I was younger, from the ages of 14 till about in my early 20s, I've been vegetarian, and I felt like something was missing from my diet in terms of just what was interesting to me. And I have been at times in my life, even when I've been pescatarian, low in vitamin B12 or low in iron stores. So it's really about where you are in your life cycle. So I was vegetarian, then I became pescatarian. I've been pescatarian since, and I'm pretty happy there. I'm actually slanting a little bit more towards vegetarian now. I might go back there at some point.
I mean, I guess that reflects the fluidity of the system you've created in the world, and you just exemplify it as a person in the world who's really mindful about what they eat. So how much, and it's in the book, but I didn't memorize it. How many portions of fish are you recommending for the pescatarian diet?
Well, you want to try to eat, if you're going to be eating fish and wanting those benefits, about 2 portions a week, at least, of about 4 ounces each. So total of 8 ounces a week.
Okay. So the vegetarian diet, the things that always made me concerned about going purely vegetarian is protein. And I know that there's vegetable proteins, but I need you to tell me more. So like, what are some protein substitutes? Like, how can I feel good about protein? And by the way, am I over-indexing on concern about proteins? Because I've also read, actually, don't worry so much about how much protein you're getting. It's fine.
Right. Tempeh, tofu, seitan are all wonderful plant protein options, as are legumes. I love them all. I have many recipes that include each of those, and they're delicious. And as far as protein is concerned, yeah, there is a concern out there that you might not be getting enough as a vegetarian. But what the data does show is that that is not the case. Most people get more than double the amount of protein that we actually need in any given day. And even vegetarians get up to 70% more than is needed. So it's really not something that most people need to worry about, as long as they're getting enough calories and eating a varied diet with hopefully some of those foods I just mentioned.
So where do you fall on the amount of calories to consume in a day? Like, I think there's something very misleading about the 2,000 calorie diet daily.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, totally. It depends on the individual. It's really hard to pinpoint that. Yes, like the USDA says 2,000 calories average, but it depends on how much you exercise. It depends on, again, where you are in your life cycle. You know, are you a female? Are you a male? Are you a teenager and going through, you know, puberty and adolescence? So it's quite variable.
Yeah, it seems like one of those things where men decided, you know, what the calorie count should be. And it's, you know, it's blind to so many different types of bodies and people and metabolisms and ages.
Exactly. How much are you exercising? What
Yeah.
type of lifestyle are you leading?
It's crazy. Okay, now the vegans, you know, obviously there's great vegetables in the world, but the thing that intrigued, so you can get from vegetarian to vegan, but a vegan has no meat products. And as we've seen, there's been such an investment in and curiosity about these meat substitutes. And I'm just wondering, like, where do you fall on that? Like, you know, Impossible Burger or Beyond Meats. I mean, the things that are for all of you, like anyone who's listening who maybe doesn't track it as much as I do, because I'm curious, like there's, you know, fake fish, there's fake chicken, there's just the mock meats have come such a long way in the last 20 years, and there's so much investment. So like from a nutritional perspective, Julie, like what do you make of it?
I think they're okay as transition foods. There is a place for them, but I do not really ask people to incorporate them extensively in their diets. They're just like other processed foods out there. They're chemically derived. They're not whole foods. They're not fresh foods. So I think minimal amounts of them are fine, but not something that you want to rely on.
I actually think that point is such an excellent point, and sometimes gets lost because people are focused so much on it's not meat, and you know, factory farm meat is so terrible, but chemically derived food, we don't even know, right? Like there's so much enthusiasm, but it's a little bit jumping the gun. Like in my opinion, there's reasons, yes, and I appreciate your sort of sanguine approach, but there's also reasons for concern, you know, to not just believe in that hook, line, and sinker. So, okay, we have the four. We have flexitarian, pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan. But what's fascinating about your book is that you help people figure out how to transition from one to the other, right? And part of the whole goal of the book is for this not to be a fad, not to be something like, I'm going to be, you know, fill in the blank today, and you just fail. So I love that you're really like a cheerleader by our side in this book. So can you tell me because this is what I started to ask, but then I asked backwards, can you tell me the philosophy behind the transitions, and then how exactly do you get from one eating pattern to another eating pattern?
Yeah. So back to where we were.
Exactly. Know that.
The philosophy is about just taking your time so that wherever you end up, it's sustainable, but also giving yourself the opportunity to assess and evaluate where you are at any given point in this process. And is this the right direction for you that you're going in? We'll talk about that a little bit more, but you know, you need to make sure that you are feeling physically okay, emotionally okay, and psychologically okay. And that, you know, this isn't just taking you down a path that maybe you shouldn't be going down. And the process involves an 8-week transition period.
which I thought was really fascinating when I first heard that. I'm like, wow, that's so like kind to the person going through it, you know, because I think so many diets are like, start today, change your life tomorrow. But this 8-week notion, I feel, is like a real point of difference with the book. Okay.
And you can even take longer than 8 weeks if you want. So there's that, there's that caveat. So yeah, 8 weeks. The first 2 weeks are focused on portion size reduction. So again, part of the philosophy is just dealing with some of the pitfalls that really get us, you know, and that's an easy one to just, you know, it's like, you're not just going into complete elimination like many of the fad diets ask you to do out there. You're simply reducing your portion sizes. So if you're eating, you know, 6 ounces of any of the transition foods, so if you're going from omnivore to flexitarian, for instance, and you want to be reducing your red meat consumption, for instance, 6 ounces of steak to 3 ounces. And then you're also supplementing with extra plant foods. So adding some more vegetables, adding some more whole grains, nuts, seeds, other plant-based foods. The next 2 weeks are for meal frequency reduction. So you reduce the number of meals with any given day that you are consuming your transition food. So if that's 3 days, that say if you're a pescatarian, you're eating 3 times a day that you're eating fish, you reduce it to 2 or maybe even 1. By the end of that 2-week transition period, you only want to be eating your transition food once a day. And then the last 2 weeks of the 6-week period, and then I'll get to the last 2 weeks of it, is for the number of days reduction. So if you're eating it on 5 days a week, I ask you to reduce it by a couple days in the first week and a couple more days in the second week. So by the end of the 6 weeks, you actually are not consuming your transition food anymore, unless you do the assessment and you feel that this is not where you want to be. Maybe you need more time. Maybe you need to go back a little bit. And that's what the last 2 weeks really are for, is to just see how your body is settling into it. Allow yourself to really check in intuitively, and make the evaluations based on the journal exercises that I give, which you know, ask you to check in with your doctor, ask you to check in with your emotional well-being. Are you irritated? Are you angry? Are you frustrated?
Because your girlfriend or boyfriend said like, oh my God, will you please start eating fish again?
Exactly. Are you preoccupied as all you're thinking about food all day, you know?
That could happen to me for sure.
Happens to us all. So you really just want to make sure that you're feeling healthy and good about what you're doing. And then if you are, you can continue on and stay in that eating pattern that you've chosen, or you can continue on to the next one if you want to go even further down the continuum.
So because I know that you've coached, you know, clients in this, do any people just want to like get it done? They're, you know, and they're like, actually, I'm really fine going, like removing meat from my diet, like tomorrow, and just give me a handful of your amazing recipes that are on the book and I'm good. Like, is there any, you know, like, is there any benefit to doing it sort of with alacrity, or is there any harm in doing it with speed?
I think people are refreshed by the notion that they can take their time. And that, you know, this is something that they're really committing to. This is about commitment, and this is not something that they want to fall short of achieving in terms of their goal sets. So I haven't really seen so much of that, where people that are working with me and I describe the plan to them and they get going on it. They believe in it. They want to do it, and they want to do it this way to see if this will work, whereas all these other diets they've tried in the past have not.
Yeah. Well, that is a benefit, right? I mean, just finding a thing that works for you. And have you found that people do, so you, as we had said, start with the broadest, so omnivore to flex, and then flex to pescatarian. What do you find? Do people all sort of hover in the middle somewhere? Like, what have you seen in terms of people transitioning and then landing in their perfect spot?
Yeah, well, only 5% of the population is either vegetarian or vegan. So there are very few, people that fall into those categories. But I am seeing more and more people definitely having success with becoming flexitarian, and happily so. And there are also, I think, many people out there that are content with the pescatarian diet and, very into the pescatarian diet is much like the Mediterranean diet, which we know to be one of the healthiest diets out there in the world as well. The blue zones are.
You have an amazing daughter and cook for her. Like, what is her eating pattern? Like, does she mirror your choices, or she's like, Mom, like, I love that you're eating fish, but that's not my thing?
She does mirror most of my eating patterns, but she is flexitarian, so she does eat some meat. She eats white meat and bacon. That's about it. She doesn't eat other red meats, but those are the two places where she ends in the flexitarian category.
I would totally give into that bacon thing. Bacon is definitely my kryptonite zone. And do you think that one of these diets is generally better? Like, if you're coaching someone, are you trying to coach them to a particular one of these choices? I mean, everything you've said is really about personalization, so I feel like you're going to tell me that it's up to you. But in terms of the universal nutritional benefits, like, does one of these diets actually, for all the things we care about, which is, physical health, all those, fighting illness, energy, sleep, does one of these patterns actually crush the others and we should pay more attention to it?
I'm sorry, Dana, I can't say that that one does. No, they're all all these are great. It depends on where you fall within the range within each. So let's say you're on the close to the omnivore side of the flexitarian, then maybe we can have this conversation. But as I was just going to start saying, even in the blue zones, which are the homes to the greatest number of centenarians around the world, they are, for the most part, flexitarian. So yes, they eat a bit of meat a couple times a month. Their portion sizes, however, about 3 ounces, unlike ours, which are 6, 8, 10, 12. And they eat a little bit of dairy, not much, but mostly goats and sheep milk.
That's super interesting. And I feel even more empowered now, I have to say. So the title of the book says, win-win diet. And when I think of diet, I always think of, calorie counting. I did confess at the beginning that diets aren't my thing, but you have a unique perspective on diet. Like, it doesn't mean, I think, what people usually think of. So I'd love to hear your thought about, like, is this trying to help people lose weight? Like, how does this fit into the conventional notion of diet, and how do you see it?
It's really more about health and achieving one's own individual optimal health, but it can be about weight loss. If that's your goal, it absolutely can be about weight loss. Research shows that people who are on plant-based diets tend to be leaner and weigh less. And oftentimes that might not be a primary goal, but you see that happening just by default of establishing better eating habits. And it's really about finding the right way to fuel yourself so that, you are feeling great and you're able to do what you want in life and in all aspects of your being, so that you can, exercise the way you want to exercise, whether that's playing with your kids, whether that's running a marathon, so that you can stay focused and efficient at work, so you can be a great parent, so you can be a great friend, so you can be in a good mood and feel uplifted. Plant-based diet has shown to enhance the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. So, it's a mood boosting way to fuel yourself. And so, it really depends on your goal set, but it really satisfies most people's goals that come to me and are looking, to change their lifestyles that way.
So you just gave us a little bit of science, and the book is filled with science. And I'm just curious, how much of the way that you set this up is based on all of your scientific readings, and what was the most exciting sort of discovery just in terms of all the research that you did? Was anything surprising and you're like, oh, you know what, if I hadn't spent a couple of years doing all this research, I would have never known fill in the blank?
Yeah, there's a lot of research in the book. I think that about what the most interesting thing or surprising thing that I learned was. Let me think about that one. Let's come back to that. I'm not 100% sure.
And also
it's also fascinating to me, honestly.
What's that?
It's also fascinating to me. It's hard to choose one thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the book, as we said, is filled with great recipes. And had you had any experience developing recipes? I mean, you obviously eat well. Where did the passion for cooking come from? Have you been cooking since you were a kid, or?
Well, my mother went to the Cordon Bleu when she was younger, so she was always in the kitchen making all sorts of meals, and she had lots of friends also that would send and share recipes with her. So cooking was definitely something that was meaningful to me growing up, and I just sort of took it upon myself to start experimenting. I'm really terrible at following other people's recipes. To this day, I have a very hard time doing that. So it was almost like I had no other choice than to develop my own. And I just did that through experimentation and choosing ingredients that I know that I like to eat or that I want to try because I've read about them or I've tasted them out at restaurants or, you know, I know they come with certain health benefits. So it was a process of bringing all that together. And then in terms of writing them, I mean, I have been doing health related writing for a long time, but to really kind of fine tune and hone the recipe writing, I worked with an amazing food editor. So that was a lucky find.
I mean, I was just going to say, coming from the, you know, food writing and editing world, having someone edit your recipes. I mean, I wrote that cookbook that was mentioned in the intro, and the book was called Mastering My Mistakes in the Kitchen, which meant that all those recipes had to be perfect. And the original recipe tester, instead of having someone, the person who developed them with my direction, then she also tested them. So she developed and tested. And when I had them spot tested, these recipes that were supposed to be perfect were completely flawed. And we had to go through the entire, like it was, it was the only bad moment of the entire process of doing that book. So
I had a cadre of recipe testers and then my editor separate.
Like that's the best way, right? Because if you don't have people testing and you don't know what people can't follow, you don't know what's unclear to them. So it's great to have that like double system.
Right. And then you just want to make sure if you're new to recipe writing that you're putting all the ingredients in the right order and that, you know, everything is kind of using language that is known in the food world and that people and the laymen can follow.
It's really an anal person's dream. That's all I gotta say, you know, because you have to, yes. And so, okay, so you did a lot of the cooking. It was a lot of the recipes are just drawn from things that you love to make. So are we sort of getting like a little snapshot of your life here? Like, are these recipes ones that you make all the time? Like for my book, a lot of them absolutely came from meals that I made and failed because that was the point of the book. But I also just had to like make and fail things for the purpose of the book. What was your process there like?
Yeah, most of these recipes appear in my diet on a weekly basis. There are a few that don't. There are a few that I wanted in there to just kind of challenge myself, but also offer more options to people out there. I mean, there are 95 of them. So yeah. I definitely wanted to provide enough variety for people within every eating pattern to work with. And I also wanted ones that, so the way the recipes work is there's a recipe key for each of the eating patterns. So they're labeled, you know, F for Flexitarian, P for Pescatarian, veg, and then V. And some of them only suit one pattern. Some of them, cross over to two. Some are all four. So I was really trying to achieve that blend as well, so that people feel individually taken care of, but also that they can make these transitions fluidly between the different eating patterns.
So you were talking about like things that you would try just because you're like, oh, that seems interesting, or oh, I've like had that in a restaurant. Like, what are some of those that you weren't as familiar with, before? I mean, not before writing the book, but just in general. Like, what are some of the things that you like were curious about that other people might not know as well? Like, I think that we know tofu is a great protein, but like, are there things that you came across that you began to experiment with, where you're like, this is awesome, I'm so glad I discovered this thing?
For me, it really was about the herbs and the spices. That's what sort of changed as I was writing this book for me, is really starting to add and use more herbs and spices. So for instance, the cumin infused black beans, for instance, like never had used cumin before in black beans. And that I never make that recipe without that anymore in it. Just different ways of using the plant-based proteins, coming up with a delicious tempeh taco recipe, for instance. Tempeh, out of all of them, I feel when you crumble it, acts like a ground beef almost. So, also working with the textures and really figuring out how to satisfy people's desires to maintain a certain texture when they're eating different foods. The condiments and dressings, another thing that's super important, because again, that's where so much of the flavor component comes into recipes. So chipotle, like my chipotle crema, I'm obsessed with. So
I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, I could put that chipotle crema on like anything, like a tofu. I can't remember which recipe it's for, but like I could put that on a tofu scramble, or I could put it on a taco, or I could, like, it's this universal condiment that just seems like, oh my gosh, it'd be so fun. And then the crema is it cashew, or
it's with a veganese, actually.
Veganese.
Yeah. But the tofu scramble, I actually use saffron and turmeric in that one. And, that was really fun because the saffron gives it the beautiful color of eggs, and the turmeric comes with all these anti-inflammatory properties. And it has an aroma that, is yummy and delicious. So it was really fun working with that aspect of things for me. The granola recipe is one of my favorite recipes, the homemade granola. And that the best thing about that is you actually melt the coconut oil in a pot, you simmer it with the cinnamon and nutmeg in it. And it's like the combination of those things. And like, you just feel it, like how delicious it's going to be when you start pouring it over the oats and the quinoa and the other ingredients that are in there.
I mean, smell-o-vision is what's necessary right now. It's like at the stove, and you're in a cold place, I'm in a hot place, but either way, that sounds like it smells so good, and then tastes so good at the end. Actually, I think I'm just going to recap for people, because I think those things that you said are so important, that like the herbs and spices and the condiments, and experimenting with those and getting things that have texture, not just flavor, right? Because I think one of the things that we can miss along the way is like, I wanted to, like, weirdly enough, in my family, we're all texture. So I'm a cruncher, my daughter likes squishy, like, and we're almost agnostic about the foods, but we need the texture. And I can see how important that would be in these different diets, that you're describing. Okay. We talked about a couple of the recipes, but I would just love, I'd love to have an understanding of, I'm not going to do a week in the life of Julie, but like a day in the life, like what is, because I know that you start with this, I mean, I know you too well. I know you start with a smoothie, but like, what is your day, and why is it set up that way? And so that people who are listening are like, oh, I want to start my day that way.
Yeah, so the morning antioxidant smoothie, yes, that's how I start pretty much almost every day. I typically do top that with some of the granola. That's one option. If I do that, that's pretty much my breakfast. If I just want something else apart from the granola, I'll pair that with one of the vegan thumbprint corn muffins or a slice of whole wheat zucchini bread or three seed bread. There's like a bread section of the book, or a whole wheat crepe. So that's how I start my morning. And I don't particularly eat all that much other fruit other than what goes into that smoothie. So
Why is that?
That is because I live in New York City and I don't find the fruit to be all that good here.
So, right, like, yeah, if you're traveling, maybe you would have like more fruit in your diet.
Yeah. So I get my quota, what I need in the morning, and I leave it pretty much at that. And then for lunch, I usually have my go-to lunch salad. And the base ingredients for that are romaine, grape tomatoes, cucumber, avocado, walnuts. And then you can add a protein of your choice from any of the 4 eating patterns. And I have my white balsamic dressing, which is a big winner, that goes on that. And I often will have an almond flour tortilla on the side with that. Or if I've made some of my plant-based meatballs, which are another of my favorite recipes, maybe I'll have that on the side, a few of those with some tomato sauce, or I have a Ligurian style pesto in the book. I love to top the plant-based meatballs with that. So usually a little bit of a side with that. It could be a leftover from the night before as well. So that is for lunch. Then in the afternoon, if I need a snack, I typically have some nuts and maybe a couple slices of dried mangoes. And then for dinner, I mix it up a lot. So it could be the meatless Monday stir fry. It could be one of their 3 taco recipes in the book. It could be a tofu curry. It could be a seitan piccata. I eat pizza. I eat pasta. So
in the book, you talk about carb phobia, and that people should not be like so carb fearful. Tell everyone about that.
I mean, carbs are what fuel our brains, our, muscles, and healthy fats as well. So the idea of eliminating them, it doesn't really make all that much sense, but what does is to not have the refined variations of them. So staying with the whole grain options. And there are so many out there, or, if it's pasta, banza is one of my favorites. That's made out of chickpea flour, or whole wheat pasta. Corn pasta is another one I really like. But
I just discovered, again, I'm not in the States, but there's a brand called Rumo that I've seen for gluten, pasta with gluten, but they do the best gluten-free pasta I have ever had. So it's RUMMO. If you see it, it's like, it keeps the texture. What I find with banza and some other pastas that are alternates, because I've tried them all because my husband is gluten-free, they fall apart. They just don't hold their shape and they don't have a good texture. But this one has been life-changing for me. Well, we're going to go to questions, and we have some questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to ask those, and we can keep going with questions that I have. So all of you who are listening, feel free to jump in and put some questions in the Q&A box. Are you going to ask Victoria, do you want to ask the questions? Hello.
Yeah, I can ask for you guys, unless Dana, you want to.
I mean, I feel like they're here. I can read them, unless there's like a secret store, then whatever. It's
no, not at all. You can totally ask the questions.
The controlling interviewer. Okay, so John wants to know if you have any recommendations on grains. I mean, grains are such a great part of all of these diets.
Yeah, and I was going to actually finish my last thought by saying that all the studies out there, just on the carb note, show that in addition to fruits and vegetables, whole grains are like the 3rd most important thing to include in your diet. So that said, bulgur is actually one of my favorite grains. Yeah. And of course there's quinoa. There is all different variations of wild rice. Millet is one of my daughter's favorite, which is interesting. Not as much one of mine, but we do make it frequently for her. How
do you feel about buckwheat? I feel like there's just been like this little resurgence of buckwheat.
I think buckwheat is great. I'm a big fan of soba noodles. I don't typically have it apart from that as much, but it's certainly healthy. Farro is another great one. Amaranth, amaranth porridges in the morning. That is going to be a recipe in my next book.
I do think it's worth saying that the thing about all these grains is you can do a multi-grain porridge that's so healthy and sustaining, and a great way to start a day. Like, I love the idea of an amaranth porridge or just like a mixed grain.
Yeah, and I do that all the time with my grains. Actually, when I have them with a main dinner meal, I often mix them. I'll do like a quinoa bulgur mix or quinoa millet mix. It's fun to do that.
When you do that, do you cook them in separate pots because they cook at different times, like for different lengths of time, or you just call it a day and do them together?
If it's vastly different, yes. If it's not, no. So if it's a brown rice and it takes 45 minutes, yes. If it's quinoa and millet, they're about the same time, and same with bulgur. So those are fine to do together.
Okay, thank you for that question, John. Susan, what about coffee, tea? Any insight into what's comprising those smoothies?
Sorry, so what about coffee and tea?
To be honest, I think it's two separate questions. And Susan, you can pop in here and correct me if I'm wrong. But coffee and tea aren't really, we haven't talked about them. Like, we haven't talked about liquids really much at all. And some people like drink in a healthy way or an unhealthy way all through their day. How do you feel about coffee? Like, should I absolutely force my husband to stop, or is it fine?
Yeah, coffee is fine. It has many health benefits, as long as it's black. Putting, right, I know, we all love our sweet, milky coffees. And again, on an occasional basis, that's fine. But the studies show that it's the black coffee that is really good for us, up to about 3, 4, 5 cups a day even is fine. I know that sounds a lot, but it's true.
We didn't talk about, which just because we were talking about dairy and sweet, we didn't talk about swapping out like whole cow milk for alt milks. Again, which is a huge category of milk these days. I'm curious, as a nutritionist, what your opinion is on the values of these milks, right? Because they have different, not just flavor profiles, but they have different nutritional profiles. And then I'm also really curious about their impact on the environment.
Yeah, and I do have a section on dairy and the plant milks and all that, with the charts and stuff in the book, actually, that compare different plant milks to dairy. But yeah, the nutritional profiles are definitely different. Many of the plant milks don't necessarily have as much protein, vitamin D, and they don't have B12. Some are fortified. So if you're vegan, for instance, you would probably want to get a fortified variation. But they're great options. Very new research is actually showing that the USDA recommendation of 3 cups of milk a day is not actually necessary. It's more like 1. So, and that's excluding children, and children's like a whole nother category to talk about. But yeah, I mean, I think a great place for both dairy and plant milk, and you just have to be knowledgeable about what the nutritional differences are between them, because they aren't the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, and the other thing about a lot of the alt milks, a lot of them are filled with gums and sugars, and they're so it's an important label reading exercise. Okay, so
and carrageenans, which are like inflammatory, so yeah, there are lots of additives and preservatives in them as well.
Right, so something for people to watch out for. Okay, so Susan says, indeed, 2 separate questions. So tell us what's inside that smoothie, your morning get going smoothie.
So that is frozen banana, frozen strawberries, and frozen blueberries, a tablespoon of almond butter, coconut water, mostly coconut water, with a couple tablespoons of almond milk, and about 1/4 teaspoon of maple syrup.
Yeah. What do you think of the powders, like maca powder, and like, there's such a gigantic world of powders. Like, where do you fall on that?
I'm not a big believer in them. And I'm also not a big believer in any supplements, really. I think it's fine and great if you need them and you're really not getting your nutrients from elsewhere, but I prefer people to get what they need from Whole Foods.
Yeah, I'm so with you. Okay. Anne, What would your first recommendation be to a family of adults and kids who, due to pandemic restrictions, no longer have the income to support a meat-based diet? Goals: feed the family, perhaps in a more healthy way, but also spend less money. Oh, it's such a good question, because beans, beans, beans. I can't wait to hear what you say.
Well, beans, rice, and plant-based proteins are actually less expensive than most meats out there. So if you do a cost comparison between, say, a red meat product and tofu, tofu is between $2.50 and $3, and meat cuts are pretty much $4 and above per pound. So that's a big difference. But eggs are cheap as well, so that's definitely a good protein source. There are many different businesses out there now that sell imperfect fruits and vegetables that come at a less expensive cost, such as there's one called Ugly Fruits, I think, and Imperfect Foods. So if you do a search online for those terms, imperfect, fruits and vegetables, or fruits, or ugly fruits and vegetables, you'll find a bunch of businesses that are great for that. And then of course,
I'm gonna pause there for 1 second, because I actually gave a TED talk on this topic. Actually, ironically, because I think that it's so important to define, these fruits and vegetables are considered ugly or imperfect for the silliest reasons, like an apple that doesn't fit the exact hole of a medium size, so it's like a little smaller. Like, these fruits and vegetables are so they're nutritious. It's fantastic for the farmers to have them gleaned instead of being plowed under. So that's such an excellent point, and they are at a better price point, but super delicious food.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to say that, both you and I, Dana, do a lot of nonprofit work, and there are organizations out there that deliver healthy meals, whether it's City Harvest, or I work with one called Kari. So if you kind of go to their websites, they're doing deliveries and markets all over the place, if you happen to be near one. So those are good options as well. And then other types of community sourcing of foods.
I was curious, because we were talking about beans and grains, and sometimes just to unlock the nutritional powerhouse of you have to have things that complement each other. And it seems like if you're trying to feed a family and you want it to be nutritious and affordable, is that an important thing to think about or educate yourself about? The beans and rice together, why are those things good? There's a reason.
Yeah, well, to form a complete protein, essentially, but it's not as important to just have it all in the same meal as it is to meet your requirements throughout the day in any given day.
Okay, good to know. Edith, thank you. I was recently diagnosed with osteoporosis. I prefer not to go on Fosamax. I'm with you. Which foods would you recommend for high calcium intake?
So tofu is great, of course. Milk products, if you want them, or fortified plant-based milk products. Leafy greens, dark leafy greens like kale, bok choy, broccoli. Those are all great for calcium. So
do any of those greens lose the calcium if they're cooked? Is there a raw versus cooked component here to think about?
Not necessarily with calcium. It's possible, depending on which one specifically. It's generally not the best thing to cook vegetables, especially if you're going to be boiling them, because it leaches them of the nutrients. But you can cook them to the right amount so that you don't lose those nutrients. And some actually are better when cooked. So such as tomatoes, carrots, asparagus, mushrooms. There's a whole list of foods that actually get enriched in their nutritional profiles by cooking. And then there are ones that don't. So you need to sort of become knowledgeable about those. And I do talk about that in the book as well. So I provide those lists.
That's great, because that was a very fast. Wow. Okay. What are some great desserts that you might recommend, Julie, that are healthy alternatives? And what's your favorite spice that you use that's good for you? Because of course we didn't even talk about the health properties of all these spices and herbs, of which there are many.
Yeah. So with the first question was
great desserts.
Great desserts. Whole wheat chocolate chip cookies is one of the recipes that I love. That's made with flax egg. So that's, and plant-based butter. So that's a vegan recipe. I love, banana and ice cream bowls. So that's another one.
What is that exactly?
That is frozen bananas made in a blender with, I have a chunky monkey version in the book of it.
No.
So throwing in some chocolate chunks and walnuts. There is a chocolate peanut butter version. There is one that's chocolate raspberry. So you can really cater to your preferences and likes. You can pretty much throw anything in there, and plant milk. And so that's great. Vegan chocolate mousse, that's a good one.
I think, Susan, there's lots of good dessert options. Okay, I'm going to stop you because that's amazing. Susan just said, "Yum." Exactly.
I have a sweet tooth, so I'm not gonna lie about that.
Somebody has been known to eat some ice cream, which I think makes you a more lovable human. Lovable anyway. And then, what are your favorite spices that are good for you?
Cumin is definitely one. Turmeric is another. Peppermint, great for digestion, so these are, they have anti-inflammatory properties. They're great for digestion. Good,
fennel seeds.
Fennel seeds, I'm not a big fan of.
Oh, why?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't use them, but B, I think when I have had them, I just don't really love the taste of them.
This is so great. Someone's coming to give me some more light because I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's
get dark there.
Can it get brighter? And so he came, he's like, obviously you're talking in the dark. And he's totally right. Thank you very much. Okay. So I think if you guys have one more question or any other questions. And if you don't, I have my final Julie questions. Okay. He tried to turn on the light, but clearly I'm in shadow here. Okay, let's see. Looks like we don't have more questions, so I'm going to ask you a couple of little last questions, because you really set yourself up for success by having a well-stocked kitchen and cooking. Everything we've talked about, so much of what we talked about really is just figure out your plan, figure out what's good for you, right for you, cooking. But what happens when you travel or go on the road? What's the result there? How do you manage your eating patterns on the road?
I try to bring my food when I'm in transit as much as I can. So I plan for long flights or train rides, and I definitely have the meals that travel well and avoid those that don't. So you don't want to bring avocado on a plane, for instance. Yeah. And then, so yeah, plain food is not something I ever eat. And then, yeah, it just, if you're in an airport or a train station and you're looking for the better options because you haven't had the time to actually prepare something, look for the Jamba Juice instead of, the Dunkin' Donuts or I don't know what else is there, but the McDonald's, I guess. Starbucks has some good options. You just have to get to know which are the better, healthier vendors through the hubs that you're going, and just, again, be prepared to get what you need. And then when you are at your destination, just try to stick to your plan. I really don't waver very much from my typical routine, regardless of where I am. And that is I think part of the trick of the trade. I
was going to say that actually brings us full circle, and we're just rounding up to 7. That goes back to being a gymnast and discipline, right? You're disciplined, you're going to go, but you're going to stick to your plan. And what's so lovely about the book is that it allows people to relax into the plan and find a plan that's right for them that they can stick to. And it doesn't take a lot of discipline. It's like you fall in love with feeling better, and you fall in love with the food, and it's kind of all good. And and that's time. Thank you, Julie. That was so much fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank all of you for being with us and joining in this great conversation. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you all so much.
And thank you to both of you, Julie and Dana. This has been such a lovely hour, and I'm so glad that you were both able to join us tonight. And of course, don't forget to purchase a copy of the Win-Win Diet. You can easily click on the links that were sent to you in the chat box, or you can come visit us in store and purchase your copy. Either way, just purchase your copy of this amazing book, and hopefully we will see you soon. Thank you both again.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.